My dad and his lawyer ambushed my birthday to steal my $2.15 million house for my sister. I smiled as 3 police cruisers crashed their plan. My father, Arthur, stood in the center of my massive living room, the one with the vaulted ceilings and the panoramic, floor-to-ceiling glass panels overlooking the dark, glassy surface of Lake Tahoe, and declared the end of my life as I knew it. It was 8:14 p.m. The room instantly went so dead quiet that you could hear the soft hum of the climate control system and the fizz of champagne bubbles dying in 40 untouched crystal flutes. Everyone needs to clear out. The party is finished. Julian is here to handle the paperwork, he projected to the room. He didn't say it to me. He said it to the 42 extended family members, colleagues, and friends scattered around my property. He spoke with the unearned, booming authority of a man who had spent his entire 64 years treating my existence as a minor administrative error that he was finally getting around to correcting. He pulled his phone from his tailored suit jacket with the practiced arrogance of a man who believed the universe existed solely to validate his whims. 42 people stood entirely frozen. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my carefully selected circle of friends, all of them holding catered plates of Wagyu beef crostinis and glasses of imported Pinot Noir, wearing the collective, horrified expression of pedestrians watching a multicar pileup in slow motion, desperately trying to calculate the blast radius. And then, there was my sister, Chloe. Chloe is 32 years old, and she stood right next to the massive stone fireplace wearing a silk emerald green dress that I instantly recognized because it was mine. She was holding a glass of actual vintage champagne, and she did not look even fractionally embarrassed by the hostile takeover happening in my living room. She looked radiant. She looked like a woman who had spent weeks doing the prep work and was now just waiting to collect her prize. "Don't make a scene, Eleanor. She'll come around," Chloe said to my father, her voice carrying easily over the silence. "She always caves when things get public." My father nodded slowly, the deeply satisfied nod of a patriarch who has pulled the strings and is now just waiting for the puppet to dance. I just nodded back. It wasn't the defeated, exhausted, fine take what you want nod that I had spent the first 25 years of my life producing on demand to survive the emotional meat grinder of the Vance family. No, this was a different nod. This was the terrifyingly calm, absolute silence of a woman who had been waiting for this exact moment for 6 days, and who had spent every single hour of those 6 days preparing for it with the cold, systematic, ruthless precision of someone who builds military-grade security architecture for a living. My father interpreted my silence as weakness. That was his first catastrophic miscalculation. His second miscalculation was not knowing about the phone call I had made 30 minutes before the caterers even arrived, a direct line call to Detective Marcus Ramirez of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Detective Ramirez had been extremely professional, highly attentive, and incredibly efficient when I had walked into his precinct 5 days earlier carrying a decrypted hard drive containing 12 hours of 4K, cloud-stored, night vision security footage, accompanied by a fully drafted, legally binding trespassing and grand larceny report. But my father's third mistake was the one he made 6 days ago. To explain that, I need to explain exactly who I am, and exactly what I do. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 36 years old, and I have been building walls, both literal and metaphorical, since I was 19. I started by building a reputation as the only person in the Vance family who refused to play the game. I was the one who didn't ask for loans, who didn't need bailouts, and who moved out the second I legally could. It was a lonely way to live, but it bought me the silence I needed to build my life's work. Sentinel Home AI. I started Sentinel in a cramped, unheated studio apartment in San Francisco back in 2012 with a refurbished laptop, a cheap soldering iron, and a deeply ingrained, trauma-born belief that most human beings drastically underestimate exactly how much a well-placed camera can see. Today, Sentinel designs heavily integrated, AI-driven smart security ecosystems for ultra-high-net-worth residential and commercial clients across the globe. We build custom, invisible camera arrays, AI-assisted predictive motion detection, cloud storage, with forensic-grade, tamper-proof timestamps, and smart lock networks keyed to highly encrypted biometric data. We currently employ over 90 people. We have headquarters in Silicon Valley, and a secondary hub in Austin. We have an annual revenue that would literally cause my father to go into cardiac arrest if he ever saw the balance sheets. He doesn't know the numbers, of course, because he stopped asking about my little tech hobby roughly a decade ago when it became abundantly clear that my success would require him to admit he was wrong about my potential. I designed and installed the security system in my Lake Tahoe house myself. I do not mean that I hired a crew and supervised them. I mean I spent 3 weeks physically running the Cat6 cables through the drywall, installing the sensors, and calibrating the biometric nodes. The property is covered by 48 distinct optical sensors. Interior, exterior, infrared, and thermal. There are military-grade smart locks on every single entry point, including the garage and the wine cellar, with individual, encrypted access codes that log directly to my private server. There are motion sensors mapped to the specific weight and gait of a human being on all 3 floors. And, most importantly, there is high-fidelity audio capture in the primary living spaces, which is perfectly legal under Nevada law for a homeowner on their own private property. I have always possessed the quiet, chilling instinct that documentation is the only true form of self-defense. The house itself sits right on the water on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe. I bought it in 2021 for $2.15 million. It was a steal for the market. It boasts 5 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, a massive wraparound deck built from reclaimed redwood, and those breathtaking, towering windows that my father's greedy eyes had been scanning all night like a conqueror, assessing his new territory. I had lived in this house, completely alone and blissfully happy, for 3 years. In that entire time, my family had visited exactly twice. During both of those visits, they communicated their absolute disdain for my independence in that passive-aggressive, ambient way that toxic families perfect. My father repeatedly mentioned that the square footage was grossly underutilized. My mother, Helen, a woman whose entire personality consists of smoothing over my father's abuses while secretly orchestrating them, sighed heavily in every room, and muttered about how much wasted potential the guest wing had. My sister, Chloe, didn't say a word. Instead, she walked through my home with the slow, predatory, deliberate focus of a woman memorizing a floor plan. I noticed it. I cataloged it in the back of my mind. Professionally and personally, I have a mental folder for situations where I don't quite have enough data to execute a defensive protocol yet, but I know a threat is forming. To fully grasp the architecture of this betrayal, you need to understand the Vance family dynamics. My father, Arthur, is a retired corporate real estate developer. He made good money in the 90s, but more importantly, he parlayed that money into a god complex so massive it requires the constant, groveling submission of everyone around him to maintain its structural integrity. He introduces himself to strangers by listing his former assets. He believes he is the absolute authority on everything and the ultimate owner of everyone in his bloodline. His core philosophy regarding me has always been simple: Eleanor takes care of herself, so Eleanor requires nothing. Therefore, whatever Eleanor acquires is surplus, and that surplus legally belongs to the family. Chloe, at 32, is his masterpiece. She is stunningly beautiful, incredibly charming, and has never, not once in her entire life, collided with a consequence. My parents established a pattern of unconditional rescue when she was a toddler, and they never stopped. She has lived rent-free in 4 different luxury apartments over the last 6 years, inevitably being evicted or fleeing when her informal arrangements with various wealthy boyfriends collapsed. Currently, she was living in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in Reno that she loudly complained was giving her seasonal depression. And then there is my mother, Helen, the softest, quietest, and undeniably the most lethal member of the family. She communicates entirely in mild, concerned tones, making you feel like she's your biggest ally right as she slides the knife into your ribs. She enables every single one of my father's destructive whims, masking them as worrying about the family's well-being. These were the 3 people standing in my living room at 8:14 p.m., attempting to formally steal my home in front of 42 witnesses. I had always known they would try something. I just didn't expect them to be stupid enough to try it after spending 96 hours inside a house that was essentially one giant, recording supercomputer. It started 6 days prior. I had flown to Chicago for a major cybersecurity convention. I returned on a Thursday afternoon at roughly 3:45 p.m. The absolute second I unlocked my front door, I knew the perimeter had been breached. If you live alone, you know what I mean. There is a specific, undisturbed stillness to a house that has been empty. The air settles. The temperature equalizes. When I stepped into my foyer, the air felt bruised. It was too warm. There was a disruption in the atmospheric quiet. I stood completely still on the expensive hardwood, my suitcase still in my hand, and just let my senses adjust. The ambient jazz music faded as my father reached over and physically unplugged the Sonos speaker. "Everyone, listen up," Arthur boomed. "The celebration is over. My attorney is pulling into the driveway. Well, he's here now. Julian is here to handle the paperwork. Everyone needs to clear out." The room froze. 42 people stopped chewing, stopped talking, stopped breathing. Julian Thorne stepped forward, opening his briefcase on my marble kitchen island. "Eleanor," he said, using his best reasonable adult voice, "your father has explained the situation regarding your sister's housing crisis. Given the excessive square footage of this property, and your status as a single, childless woman, we have drafted a long-term, rent-free residential lease for Chloe. It grants her exclusive use of the guest wing and shared use of the common areas. If you refuse to sign, your father is prepared to litigate regarding the initial seed money he claims he provided for your company. Note: my father never gave me a single dime. It was a pure, fabricated bluff designed to terrify me. Chloe stood by the fireplace, sipping champagne, looking incredibly pleased with herself. Don't make a scene, Eleanor, she chimed in. She'll come around. She always caves when things get public. I set my glass of sparkling water down on the table. I didn't say a word to Julian. I didn't look at my sister. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I looked at my father. You think I'm weak because I've spent my life walking away from your abuse, I said, my voice perfectly calm, slicing through the dead silence of the room. You think my silence was surrender. It wasn't. It was data collection. I pressed the widget on my screen. Checkmate. A heavy mechanical thunk echoed through the house as all 16 steel smart deadbolts engaged simultaneously. The house was locked down. Then, the 8.5-inch OLED TV, mounted above the fireplace, clicked on. It didn't play a movie. It played the night vision footage from day 3. The resolution was flawless. The timestamp glowed brightly in the bottom corner. No. The entire party watched as the giant screen showed my father, my mother, and my sister sitting in my exact living room, drinking my stolen wine. Then, the $4,000 surround sound system kicked in, broadcasting their audio in cinematic quality. Honestly, Eleanor is so incredibly naive. Once I'm fully moved in, she won't dare call the cops. Chloe's voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings. She'll fold. Eleanor always folds when I put the pressure on. My father's booming laugh filled the room. Just make sure we bring it up when she's surrounded by the family. She won't make a scene. My mother's venomous, soft whisper. Aunt Beatrice let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. Uncle Marcus dropped his plate of risotto. The ceramic shattered loudly against the hardwood floor, but nobody even looked at it. Julian Thorne, the high-priced lawyer, physically flinched. He stared at the screen, then looked at the date stamp, then looked at my father. The color completely drained from Julian's face. He realized in real time that his client had lied to him, and that he was currently standing in the middle of an active crime scene, attempting to extort a homeowner. My father's face went from smug, to confused, to a violent, apoplectic purple. Turn that off, he roared, taking a step toward me. That is manipulated. That's illegal recording. Nevada is a one-party consent state for recording in areas where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy from the homeowner. Arthur, I said coldly. And you are trespassing in my home. Through the massive glass windows, the driveway suddenly illuminated with flashing red and blue lights. 3 Washoe County Sheriff's cruisers had silently rolled up the driveway. Julian Thorne didn't hesitate. He snapped his briefcase shut with the speed of a man whose career was flashing before his eyes. Arthur, Julian said, his voice trembling slightly. I am formally withdrawing as your legal counsel. Do not contact my office. Julian practically sprinted to the front door, manually unlocked the deadbolt, and threw himself out into the night, brushing past the officers walking up the steps. Detective Ramirez stepped into the foyer, flanked by 2 heavily armed deputies. He surveyed the dead, silent, terrified crowd, his eyes landing on my family. Eleanor Vance? Ramirez asked formally. Right here, detective, I said. I handed him a thick manila folder containing the USB drive, the printed logs, and Cassandra's legal filings. The 3 individuals in question are Arthur Vance, Helen Vance, and Chloe Vance. The evidence of burglary, grand larceny, and criminal trespass is fully documented. Chloe finally snapped out of her shock. You psycho bitch, she screamed, lunging forward. You set us up, you framed us. A female deputy stepped directly into Chloe's path, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back with practiced, effortless efficiency. Ma'am, calm down, or you're going on the floor, the deputy warned. Let her go, my mother shrieked, finally breaking her facade. She's my daughter. This is a family dispute. Eleanor, tell them to stop. It ceased being a family dispute the second you stole an $8,000 Cartier watch from my bedroom, Helen, I said. Detective Ramirez looked at my mother. Ma'am, do you have a Cartier watch in your possession? My mother froze. She looked completely panicked. The female deputy expertly grabbed my mother's designer handbag from the counter and unzipped it. Right on top, gleaming under the recessed lighting, was my vintage Cartier watch. Well, Ramirez said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. That makes the inventory process very easy. The deputy turned to Chloe. We need to search your bag, too, miss. Chloe was hyperventilating. No. You can't do that without a warrant. Actually, incident to a lawful arrest for burglary, we absolutely can, the deputy said. She grabbed Chloe's massive tote bag and dumped it onto the kitchen island. Out tumbled my property. A $300 bottle of La Mer face cream, 2 pairs of my expensive Lululemon leggings, A diamond tennis bracelet I hadn't even realized was missing yet. And, the absolute cherry on top, the physical, counterfeit brass key my father had used to breach the house. The entire extended family watched in absolute, horrified silence as the police systematically handcuffed my father, my mother, and my golden child sister. My father was fighting the cuffs, his face red with fury. "You are dead to me, Eleanor. Do you hear me? Dead. You will never get another thing from this family." "Arthur," I replied, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "I never wanted anything from you except for you to leave me alone. You couldn't even do that. Enjoy the holding cell." They marched them out. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind them. The remaining 39 party guests stood in my living room, completely paralyzed. The blue and red lights from the cruisers washed through the windows, casting long, dramatic shadows across the walls. Uncle Marcus finally broke the silence. He looked at the door, then looked at me, and let out a long, heavy exhale. "Well," Marcus said quietly, "I always knew Arthur was a son of a bitch. I just didn't know he was a stupid one." A nervous, collective chuckle rippled through the room. "The cake is chocolate raspberry," I announced to the crowd, picking up my glass of sparkling water. "Please, help yourselves, the party is not over." It took 7 months for the legal system to finish chewing them up. Cassandra Sterling was merciless. Because of the overwhelming, undeniable video and audio evidence, plus the stolen property recovered directly on their persons by law enforcement, none of their defense attorneys even attempted to take it to trial. They all took plea deals. My father pleaded guilty to felony criminal trespass and unauthorized key duplication. He avoided jail time due to his age and lack of prior convictions, but he was hit with 3 years of heavily monitored probation, a massive fine, and a permanent, legally binding restraining order preventing him from coming within 500 yards of me or my property. The scandal completely ruined his reputation in his country club circle. My mother pleaded guilty to grand larceny for the watch. She received 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. Chloe got the worst of it. Because she had prior, sealed misdemeanors for shoplifting that the judge unsealed for this case, she was sentenced to 90 days in the county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. She also has a felony on her record now, which makes leasing those luxury apartments she loves so much mathematically impossible. I haven't spoken to any of them since the night they were escorted out of my house in handcuffs. I spent the last few months working intensively with a trauma therapist. She helped me unpack the profound, lingering damage of being raised by people who viewed my boundaries as an insult and my success as a communal asset. I learned that I had spent my entire adult life building physical security systems for other people because I was desperately trying to build a safe fortress for myself. I finally have it. I am sitting on my reclaimed redwood deck right now, typing this out. The sun is setting over Lake Tahoe, turning the water into a sheet of liquid copper. The house is completely silent. The air is cool and undisturbed. My security system is humming quietly in the background. The logs are clean. The biometric locks are engaged. There is exactly one person on the face of the earth who has the access code to this property, and it is me. My father thought I would fold. He thought my silence was hesitation. He didn't realize that when a woman stops arguing, stops crying, and stops trying to explain her humanity to people who refuse to see it, she isn't surrendering. She's just recalibrating the targeting system. The house is mine. The peace is mine. And for the first time in my 36 years of life, I am entirely, untouchably safe.